Content warning. This video contains intensely frightening real-life experiences involving home intruders, stalking, and deeply disturbing situations. It may not be suitable for viewers under 18 or for anyone who is sensitive to fear-inducing content. If that applies to you, please consider skipping this video. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. There is a specific kind of fear that only comes at night, and only when you're completely, utterly alone. It's not the same as watching a horror movie. It's not the adrenaline rush of a haunted house, or the manufactured terror of a Halloween maze. This fear is real. It lives in the creak of a floorboard you've heard 1,000 times, but somehow sounds different tonight. It lives in the silence that follows a sound you can't quite explain. It lives in the moment you realize that the house you thought was empty might not be. Every single story you are about to read actually happened. These are not campfire tales. These are not embellished anecdotes. These are real Americans, regular people living in regular homes, who experienced something so unsettling, so deeply wrong, that they have never forgotten it. Some of them still check under their beds. Some of them can't sleep without every lock in the house double-checked. Some of them will never leave a window open at night again. You're going to want to read all of these in one sitting. You're probably going to wish you hadn't started, but you won't be able to stop. Let's begin. The voice in the night. I want to start by giving you some context, because context is what makes this story so disturbing. I'm 32 years old. I am a grown adult. I've lived alone before, traveled alone, driven cross-country alone. I do not scare easily. But I'm going to tell you about a night that made me feel like a frightened child, and I still can't fully explain what I heard. My brother and I own a duplex together in Portland, Oregon. It's a solid 2-story house, split down the middle. He takes the main floor and finished basement. I take the upper level. We share a small foyer but have completely separate living spaces, including separate kitchens and separate entrances. It works perfectly for us. We're close, but not in each other's faces. My brother, David, is a contractor. He spends about half his time at his girlfriend's place across town, maybe 3-4 nights a week. When he's gone, I'm essentially alone in the whole building, which, like I said, has never been a problem for me. Until one Tuesday night in late October. I'd been home alone for 2 days. I wasn't unsettled by it. I went about my evening the way I normally do. Cooked dinner, watched TV, did some work on my laptop. Around 9 that night, I decided to watch a horror film, a new release I'd been putting off. I pulled up the streaming app, turned off the lights, and settled into my couch. Now, my upstairs unit has an open floor plan. The living room, dining area, and kitchen all exist in a single connected space. My couch faces the television, which means my back faces the rest of that open space. The dining table, the dark corner near the hallway, the kitchen behind me. In the daytime, it's a nice airy layout. At night, watching something scary, alone, it starts to feel a little less cozy. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder more than once during that movie, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. When you're watching 2 hours of psychological horror in a completely dark apartment with nothing but the glow of a television screen, your brain starts making deals with your nervous system. You start listening differently. You start noticing how quiet things actually are. The movie ended around midnight. I brushed my teeth, did my usual rounds, checked the front door lock, the back door, the sliding glass door on the small balcony off the kitchen. Everything was secure. I turned off every light in the apartment and climbed into bed. I fell asleep fast. I woke up at 1:14 a.m. At first, I wasn't sure why I'd woken up. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my brain to catch up to wherever I was. The room was completely dark, silent. And then I heard it. A voice coming from downstairs. It was a woman's voice, and I recognized it immediately. It was my sister-in-law, Emma, my brother's girlfriend, the woman who lived 20 minutes away and had absolutely no reason to be in our building at 1 in the morning. I want to be precise about this. It wasn't a sound from outside. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't the TV left on somewhere. The voice was inside the house. It was below me, in my brother's unit, and it sounded exactly like Emma. She seemed to be calling out, not screaming, not in distress, just calling, like she was trying to get my attention without being too loud. Like she was standing at the bottom of the interior stairwell that connects our units, yelling up to me. I was groggy, still half asleep, in that foggy, not quite rational state where your brain takes shortcuts. My first thought, honestly my only thought, was that something had happened. Maybe she and David had a fight. Maybe there was some kind of emergency. Maybe she needed help. I got out of bed. The hallway was pitch black. I fumbled for the light switch, flicked it on, and blinked against the light. I crossed through the living room, the TV dark and silent, and heard the voice again. Clearer now, closer. And this time, I could make out a word. My name. She was saying my name. I went down the interior staircase, calling back to her. Emma, what's going on? My voice sounded strange in the dark of the lower unit, echoey, too loud. I reached the bottom of the stairs and felt along the wall for a light switch. Couldn't find it. I kept walking, one hand trailing the wall, into the short hallway that leads to David's kitchen. I found a switch and hit it. The kitchen light came on, those old fluorescent fixtures that start dim and slowly build to full brightness. In that first dim moment, while the light was still warming up, I scanned the room. Empty. The kitchen was completely empty. No Emma, no David, no one. I walked through the kitchen into David's living room. Empty. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I walked down to his bedroom, pushed open the door. Empty. I stood in the middle of his bedroom and called Emma's name. Loudly. Once. No answer. And then in the silence that followed, I heard something fall in that very bedroom. Something dropped. A hard, distinct sound, like an object hitting the floor. Right there in the room I'd just searched and confirmed was empty. I did not stay to investigate. I went back up those stairs faster than I'd come down them, went directly to my room, locked my door, grabbed my phone. I called Emma twice. No answer. I texted her, "Are you at the house? Did you just come by?" And I sat on the edge of my bed with every light in my room blazing, trying to convince myself that I'd imagined all of it, that I'd been half asleep and misheard something, that the sound in the bedroom was just the house settling. I fell asleep sometime after 3 a.m. with all the lights still on. In the morning, I woke up to a text from Emma. "Why were you calling me at 1 a.m.? Everything okay?" She had been at her own apartment all night. She confirmed it. David confirmed it. Neither of them had been anywhere near our duplex. I went downstairs the next morning to look for whatever had fallen. There was nothing on the floor. Not a single object out of place. No evidence that anything had fallen at all. I've never hallucinated. I've never had sleep disorders. I've never experienced anything like this before or since. The most rational explanation I have is that I heard something in a half-asleep state, and my brain assembled it into something familiar. But the voice was so clear, so specific, so undeniably Emma, and whatever fell in that empty bedroom I heard that. I was fully awake, standing in the room. I don't have a clean ending to this story. I never found out what happened that night. I just know that when I turn off the lights in my apartment now, I move a little faster. Total words for this section. Approximately 1,050. Continuing. Actually, here is something I want you to think about before I move on. Ask yourself, if you woke up at 1 a.m. and heard someone you loved calling your name from another floor of your empty house, what would you do? Because whatever you're thinking right now, the next story is worse. The Backyard Watcher. Growing up, I was left home alone a lot. My mom raised 3 of us by herself, me, my older sister, and my little brother. And she worked as a registered nurse on rotating overnight shifts. When your parent works nights, you learn pretty quickly how to manage on your own. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone. Call if there's a problem. I was 14 the night this happened. I'd had a girl over, a classmate named Jenna who I'd been talking to for a few months. We watched movies in the living room, ordered a pizza, hung out the way teenagers do when there are no parents around. Around 10:30, her dad texted her and she had to go home. Her parents were strict. She lived about 8 minutes away and she walked home, or had her dad pick her up. She left just before 11. I went upstairs to my bedroom, changed into sweats, and climbed into bed. I was watching videos on my phone with one earbud in. Comfortable, relaxed, not tired yet. My bedroom was in the back of the house, upstairs with a window that faced out over the back patio and yard. We had a small deck out there with a few chairs and a round table. Nothing fancy. I heard something scrape against the wooden deck below. It was the distinct sound of furniture moving. One of those metal patio chairs being dragged across the deck boards. A slow, deliberate scrape, like someone pulling a chair into position. I took out my earbud and listened. Silence. Then the creak of someone sitting down. I got up slowly and moved to the window. Looked down. There was a man sitting in one of our patio chairs. He was just sitting there, in our yard, at 11 o'clock at night. I leaned closer to the glass, trying to see better in the dark. My first thought, genuinely my first thought, was that it might be Jenna. She'd only left 15 minutes ago. Maybe she'd come back for something. Maybe she'd forgotten something inside. I called her name out the window. The person looked up at me. It wasn't Jenna. It was a man. I couldn't make out his features clearly in the darkness, but I could tell he was an adult male, and I did not recognize him, not even slightly. He looked up at my window with an unsettling stillness, not startled, not caught off guard, just looking up, like he'd been waiting for me to appear. I yanked back from the window so fast I nearly tripped. My heart was going. I grabbed my phone and texted my small group of friends, 4 of us who hung out regularly. I kept the message casual. Hey, is anyone messing with me right now? All 3 who responded immediately said no. What was I talking about? I believed them. None of my friends would do something like that. We weren't that kind of friend group. I was terrified. But I was also 14, and 14-year-old brains are wired a certain way, curious even when they shouldn't be. After a few minutes of sitting frozen on my bed, I crawled back to the window and slowly looked down again. He was still there, still sitting in the chair, still looking up at my window. He was definitely watching me. He'd seen me the first time, and now he knew which window was mine. And he was still sitting there, making no effort to leave, making no effort to hide. Just watching. I backed away again and sat in the middle of my bed, with my arms wrapped around my knees. I turned off the TV. I did not even want to look at my phone screen because I was afraid the light from it would be visible through the window. I sat there in total darkness, barely breathing, waiting for, I didn't know what. I sat there for 5 minutes, maybe longer. It felt like an hour. Finally, I built up the nerve to look again. He was still there. I don't know what possessed me to do what I did next. Maybe I was desperate. Maybe I thought it would scare him off. But I leaned toward the window and spoke down to him. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "What do you want?" He didn't answer, but his shoulders started to move, up and down, rhythmically, like he was laughing, hard, full body laughing, except almost no sound came out. Just a faint wheeze. The kind of laugh someone makes when they've lost all control. He was laughing at me. I told him to go away and pulled back from the window again. Went back to my bed. My hands were shaking. I was 14 years old, and there was a grown man in my backyard, laughing silently at me, and I didn't know what to do. I know what you're thinking. Call the police. 911. It's obvious. It's simple. But when you're that age, alone, and genuinely terrified, your brain doesn't always land on the obvious answer. I was frozen between panic and indecision, and I just sat there. Then I heard the back door. Not a knock. Not a bell. Someone was pushing against the back door, testing it, feeling for whether it was locked. I ran back to my room and pushed the door shut. I stood in the middle of my room, completely still. Then I heard the front door, the same pushing, testing, rattling the knob slightly, a pause, silence, then nothing. He gave up. He actually gave up. I don't know why. Maybe he decided it wasn't worth it. Maybe a car drove down the street. Maybe he heard something. But the sound stopped, and over the next 20 minutes, the house stayed completely quiet. I closed and locked my bedroom window. I did not leave my room again until my mom got home the next morning at 9. I told her everything. She wasn't sympathetic. She was furious, not at the man in the backyard, but at me for not calling 911 immediately. She was right to be angry. I was home alone, a skinny 14-year-old who probably weighed 120 soaking wet, with a grown man testing my doors in the middle of the night. If those doors hadn't been locked, I genuinely do not know what would have happened to me. I still think about that silent, wheezing laugh sometimes. The intruders. This is the story I find hardest to tell. Not because it's embarrassing, not because I came out of it looking stupid, but because when I look back on it now, as an adult, I understand exactly how close I came to something truly terrible, and the margin was paper thin. I was 10 years old when this happened. My older brother, Marcus, was 14. My little sister was 5. We were a family of 5 living in a 3-bedroom house in suburban Columbus, Ohio. Normal house, normal neighborhood. Nothing remarkable about it. It was a Friday night in late fall. Marcus had gone out with some friends earlier that evening, which he wasn't supposed to do without permission, which meant my parents were already quietly tense when the phone rang at around 9 o'clock. I was in my room playing a video game. I heard my mother's voice change, that specific pitch shift that parents have when something is wrong. And I got up to see what was happening. She was on the phone in the kitchen. Her hand was over her mouth. She was crying. Marcus had been hit by a car. He'd been crossing a street 2 miles away with his friends, and a driver ran a red light. The impact broke his leg in 2 places and fractured a collarbone. He was at the hospital, conscious, in pain, and asking for my parents. Everything happened very fast after that. My dad grabbed his coat and keys. My mom swept my little sister up from the living room. They asked me, quickly, not cruelly, but quickly, if I was okay to stay home alone. I said yes. My dad ran back to me for 30 seconds and put his hands on my shoulders and told me that Marcus was going to be fine, that it sounded worse than it was, that I should lock the doors and watch TV and he'd call me from the hospital, and then they were gone. I want to be clear. Marcus did recover. He was back home within 2 weeks, annoying me as usual. His injury healed completely. That part of the story has a happy ending. The next part does not. I went back to my video game and played for another 2 hours or so. My dad called once from the hospital to say Marcus was out of initial triage, that it was just the leg and collarbone, that they'd probably be home late, but everything was under control. I felt relieved. I turned off my game and my TV and crawled into bed with my handheld gaming device, figuring I'd stay up until my parents came home. I heard the front door open. Not a knock. Not a bell. The actual door. The sound of it swinging open. The particular creak that our front door made because my dad had been meaning to oil the hinges for 6 months. I assumed it was my parents, home earlier than expected. I put my handheld down and started to get up. But then I stopped, because I didn't hear my parents' voices. When my parents come home, there's always a pattern. The door, and then coats being hung, then voices, then footsteps on the stairs. There's always noise. There's always conversation. There was none of that. Just the creak of the door, and then silence, and then more silence. I got out of bed quietly and crept to my door. Opened it an inch. The upstairs hallway was dark. I moved to the landing. There's a banister at the top of the stairs that overlooks the living room below, and I looked down. The lights were off in the living room, but I could see 3 silhouettes, 3 tall figures standing in my living room in the dark, not moving, not talking, just standing there. They were not my parents. They were not anyone I knew. I don't know how long I stood at that banister. It might have been 2 seconds. It might have been 10. Time does something strange in moments like that. I backed away from the edge, moving as slowly and quietly as I could, and retreated to my room. I eased the door shut behind me. I heard it click, and I knew immediately that they heard it too. I went straight to my closet, opened the door as slowly as I could manage, stepped inside, pulled the door shut behind me. I pressed myself back into the corner behind a stack of storage bins and a hanging mass of old winter coats and bags of hand-me-down clothes. There wasn't much space, but there was enough to get mostly hidden. I waited. The silence was absolute. For a while, I don't know how long, nothing happened. And then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, not rushing, like someone who had all the time in the world. My bedroom door opened. I stopped breathing. I sat completely still in the dark of my closet, pressed behind the boxes, and I listened to footsteps cross my bedroom floor. I heard them move toward my bed. I heard the comforter shift. They were checking the bed, feeling for whether someone was in it. The footsteps moved away from the bed, toward the closet. I want to tell you I did something brave in that moment. I want to tell you I formulated a plan or found something to defend myself with or thought clearly. I did none of those things. I sat perfectly still and held my breath and stared at the thin strip of darkness at the base of the closet door. The closet door opened. Light from my bedroom, faint, dim, the kind that creeps in from the streetlight outside, fell across the floor of the closet. It didn't reach me. I was too far back, behind too much stuff. But someone was standing in that doorway, looking in. I could feel it. 20 seconds passed, maybe more. I didn't look up. I did not move. I did not breathe. The door closed. Footsteps crossed back to my bedroom door, and then out into the hallway, and then down the stairs. I heard voices for the first time, low, muffled, and then movement through the house, the sounds of drawers opening, closets in other rooms, the specific sounds of people systematically going through a home. I stayed in my closet for nearly an hour. When I finally heard my parents' car pull into the driveway, I ran downstairs. The front door was standing wide open. They had left it that way when they came in, and they left it that way when they left. My parents walked in to find me shaking in the hallway, the front door open to the street, lights on in every room where the intruders had searched. A television, a laptop, my dad's watch collection from the master bedroom, a camera, some cash from the kitchen drawer. Gone. My parents had left in such a panic for the hospital that neither of them had locked the front door. We never found out who those 3 people were. The police took a report and looked for prints and came up with nothing. It was a clean in and out. People who knew what they were doing. People who had probably done it before. I think about the person who opened my closet door. I think about those 20 seconds. I've thought about them hundreds of times over the years. Maybe he saw me in there and decided a 10-year-old wasn't worth the complication. Maybe he genuinely didn't see me in the shadows behind the boxes. Either way, I was close enough to touch him. The man in the woods. Here's the thing about small towns. People think they're safer than cities. Quieter, less dangerous, and in a lot of ways, they're right. But there's a specific kind of threat that small towns have that cities don't. And it's this. Out there, when something goes wrong, there are fewer people around to help you. I grew up in a small town in rural Ohio. I won't name it, but I'll tell you it was the kind of place where maybe 30 cars would pass your house on a given day. We had woods behind our property. Deep, dense tree cover that stretched back probably a quarter-mile before hitting another road. We had a big backyard, a deck, an above-ground pool, a small fish pond. My parents called it peaceful. And it was, mostly. This happened the summer I turned 17. My parents were on vacation, a rare thing. My mom's close friend had invited them on a week-long trip that she was covering financially. Since I was an only child and old enough to be left alone, I had the house to myself. For 7 days. I was 3 days in when it happened. It was a Thursday evening, warm and still light until almost 9. I was out on the back deck sitting in one of the wooden chairs, listening to music through a portable speaker. I was relaxed, completely, genuinely relaxed. The particular relaxation that comes from being 17 with no parents home and no obligations. The woods behind our house were maybe 25 yards away. Beyond the pool, beyond the pond, just the tree line. In the daytime you could see into them a little way. At dusk they became a wall of shadows. I thought I heard something. A voice, distant, from the direction of the trees. I reached over and turned the music down, listened. Nothing. Just crickets and the occasional car on the road way out front. I turned the music back up, heard it again. This time I turned the speaker all the way off, sat still, listened. From the tree line, "Hey, over here." Male voice, not a kid's voice. Deep enough that I knew immediately it was an adult. Not shouting, but projecting. The way you do when you want to be heard across some distance. My first thought was that it was just some people back there. Hikers, maybe, or neighborhood kids I didn't know, playing some game in the woods. I didn't feel alarmed exactly, just curious and slightly puzzled. But then the voice came again. "Hey, over here, we need help." And now something was different. That phrase, "we need help," carried a different weight. My brain started running through possibilities. Someone hurt, someone lost. I turned toward the trees and called back. "Hello? Who's there? We need help. Straight ahead of you. Come here." I stood up from the chair. I walked to the edge of the deck but didn't step off. "What kind of help do you need?" "Just come here. Come to the trees. Straight in front of you." And here is where something shifted in my gut. I registered it even then, this small, quiet alarm that something about this exchange was wrong, because the voice didn't say what kind of help. It didn't say, "I'm lost," or "My friend broke his ankle," or "Can you call someone?" It just said to come to the trees. I stepped off the deck anyway. I don't know why. Maybe it was the instinct to help. Maybe I was being stupid. I walked across the grass toward the tree line, calling out as I went. "I'm coming." "Where exactly are you?" "Right here. I can see you. Keep coming." I stopped, right in the middle of the yard, maybe 12 feet from the pool. I stopped and stood there and thought about what had just been said. I can see you. If someone was genuinely stuck in the woods, if their clothing was caught on something, if they'd twisted an ankle, if they were disoriented, they would be describing their situation. They would be providing information. They would be saying things like, "I'm over by the big oak," or "There are two of us," or "Please call 911. They would not be saying, "I can see you," and directing me toward them in the dark. I asked, "Are you alone?" Silence. "Hello? Are you alone or are you with someone?" No answer. I started walking backwards, slowly at first, then faster. I didn't turn my back to the trees. I kept facing them as I retreated across the yard, step by step, until I reached the deck stairs and went up them. I went inside and locked the sliding door, and the back door, and then every other door and window in the house. I sat on my couch in the living room thinking. Maybe 15 minutes passed. Then I heard the voice again, not from the tree line, from the backyard, close. I went to the window and looked out through the glass. I didn't see anyone at first, just the dark yard, the silhouette of the pool, the glint of the small pond. Then I saw him. He was on the far side of the above-ground pool, crouched or partially hidden, and I could just make out his shape. Dark clothing, medium build, and dark hair just long enough to register. He said, "I see you," and laughed. Not a warm laugh, not even a normal laugh. A low, unhinged laugh from someone who was absolutely enjoying this. I stepped back from the window. I pulled the blinds shut. My hands were not steady. I decided I was not going to engage. I was not going to give him whatever reaction he was looking for. I was not going to open a window or a door, or give him any indication of where I was in the house. I sat on the couch and stayed away from the windows. That strategy lasted about 4 minutes. Something hit the window with a force that made the whole pane rattle. An open-handed slap, hard, aggressive, deliberate. And from the other side of the glass, the same voice, now not calm at all. "Help me! Help me! Help!" I screamed at him to get off my property. I screamed that I was calling the police. I screamed that I had already called the police, that they were on their way. I don't know exactly what I said. My memory of those few seconds is fragmented. But I remember screaming with everything I had, trying to sound bigger and angrier and more unhinged than I felt. I heard him laugh again, through the glass. A lower laugh this time, almost satisfied, like I had given him exactly what he came for. And then the laugh faded. And then there was nothing. I sat on the couch for another 30 minutes, barely moving, before I was confident enough that he was really gone. I didn't sleep well that night, but I did sleep. I went through the remaining 4 days of my parents' trip hyper-aware, checking the yard constantly, sleeping with my bedroom window locked, keeping the deck lights on after dark. I think about what would have happened if I'd walked all the way to those trees. I think about it a lot. The woman under the bed. Of all the stories in this collection, this is the one that most people don't believe when they hear it. I understand why. It sounds like an urban legend. It sounds like the kind of story someone made up to scare people at sleepovers. It is not made up. I have 2 small scars on my right forearm that prove it happened. I'm 26 now. At the time of this story, I was 23, living at home with my parents in a suburb of Houston, Texas. It's a 2-story house, living room, kitchen, and dining room on the main floor, 4 bedrooms upstairs, a finished basement below. My parents travel occasionally for work, and when they're both gone, I'm alone in the house. On a Wednesday afternoon in late spring, both my parents were out. My dad was at the office. My mom had gone to run a series of errands that would take most of the day. I was home alone, and I went outside to shoot hoops in the driveway. At some point, mid-shot, I looked up at the house. There was a woman standing in the upstairs window. I want to be absolutely clear about what I saw. A woman, not a reflection, not a trick of light, not my mind playing games. A woman, standing in the window of our upstairs lounge, looking down at me. I could see her clearly, her face, her posture, the way she was standing slightly back from the glass. She was not my mother. She was not anyone I recognized. She was a stranger, standing inside my house, staring down at me. The moment our eyes met, or the moment I registered her at least, she stepped back from the window and disappeared into the room. I stood in the driveway for a moment, basketball in hand, processing what I'd just seen. Then I went inside. I checked every room on the upper floor, both bathrooms, every closet, every space large enough for a person to stand or crouch. I went back downstairs and checked the living room, the kitchen, the dining area, the first floor bedroom, every closet on that level. I went into the basement, small, just a couple of couches, a bar area, 2 storage closets, and opened the first closet, empty. Opened the second one, also empty. I stood in the middle of my basement, genuinely baffled. There was nowhere else to look. I had been thorough. Every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. She was not in the house. I went back upstairs to the main floor, stood in the center of the living room and yelled, as loudly as I could, that whoever was in my house needed to leave. Right now, I'm calling the police. My neighbor from next door, a retired man named Gerald, heard me through the wall and came over to check on me. I told him what I'd seen. He came in and helped me do a second full sweep of the house. We found nothing. No sign of anyone. No open window, no disturbed door lock, nothing. Gerald suggested she might have slipped out through the back door, which I'd left unlocked when I came in from the driveway. It was the only explanation that made any sense. We couldn't find her. She wasn't here. She must have gotten out. I locked every door and called my parents. They were concerned, but asked me to check if anything was missing. I did. Nothing was gone. All the valuables were where they should be. Gerald went home. I made dinner, watched some TV, tried to shake the feeling that was sitting in my chest. At around 10, I did one more full walkthrough of the house, checking every room and every closet one more time, before I went upstairs to my bedroom. Sleep came slowly. My mind was still running. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, going over it again. What I'd seen, what it meant, why she'd been there, what she'd wanted. I had the ceiling fan on, which helped a little. The white noise of it filled the room and kept the silence from pressing in. I don't know when I finally started to drift, but I know exactly when I snapped awake. There was movement on the other side of the bed, a sound that was clearly unmistakably human, a rustle, a shift, the specific sound of a body adjusting position, not the house settling, not the fan. A person moving, not turned over. She was getting out from under my bed. She had been there the entire time, while I'd done 2 sweeps of the house, while I'd watched TV, while Gerald and I had searched, while I'd tried to fall asleep. She'd been under my bed, in my bedroom, for hours. She stood up on the other side of the mattress. She was tall. She looked down at me. Her hair was tangled and her clothes were dirty and her eyes were, I don't have a better word for it, not right. I screamed. Not a short yell. A full, sustained, tearing scream. The kind you don't plan. The kind that just comes. And then, without any clear decision on my part, I was out of bed and around the mattress and on her, tackling her to the floor. I had my hand around her throat, not squeezing, just holding, restraining, because she was already struggling and I needed her to stop moving. My doorbell rang. Gerald. He'd heard me scream and come back over immediately. I dragged her to the front door. She was fighting the whole way, scratching and clawing at my arms. I opened the door and Gerald stepped in and helped me hold her. I called 911. We waited for the police with her twisting and spitting and threatening us, cursing in a way that suggested she was not entirely in contact with reality. When the officers arrived, one of them took one look at her and said her name. He knew her. She'd been brought in multiple times. She was a local woman with a serious drug problem and a long history of trespassing, of hiding in people's homes, of being found in places she had no business being. The officers had clearly dealt with her before. They handled it efficiently and without surprise. I stood on my front porch and watched them put her in the back of the police car. Gerald clapped me on the shoulder. He stayed for a while and we talked, and he told me I'd handled it well, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative to laughing was sitting down on the porch steps and not getting back up for a while. I went inside, locked every lock in the house, sat on the couch. The fear had mostly passed by then. What I felt instead, and I still feel it when I think about this, was something I can only describe as the specific chill of understanding how close things had been. She had been under my bed for hours. She could have been there when I was sleeping. She could have done anything. Instead, I found her. I came out of it with 2 scratches on my forearm that faded to scars over the following months. I don't leave windows unlocked anymore. I check under the bed before I turn out the light. I know that sounds paranoid, but you've read these stories now, so you understand. 5 stories, 5 people, 5 ordinary nights that became something no one should have to experience. What strikes me most about all of them, and what I hope strikes you, is how fast it happens. How completely normal the evening is, right up until it isn't. Dinner, a movie, a video game, basketball in the driveway. And then, there are things you can do. Lock your doors, every time without exception. Tell someone where you are. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if you are ever in genuine danger, call 911. Don't be 14-year-old me sitting frozen in the dark, wondering if it's really bad enough to call the police. It is. It always is. Stay safe out there. And maybe, just maybe, don't watch this video alone at midnight.